Hi everyone, we are recording. Jasmin here from Soul Alchemy with Jasmin, and today I'm joined with Cora Edwards and Shannon Gardner, and we're going to be talking about fairies, elementals, gnomes, orcs, dragons, anything that comes up. So I just thought I'll just get the ladies to mention their what they do, and then we'll start off with the topic. Cora.
Hi, nice to be with you both. I can be found on corajoanhealing.co.uk. I think that's the correct one. It'll be down in the link below. And I do energy healing and past life hypnosis regression. Over to you.
Hi, I'm Shannon, and I'm a hypnotherapist as well, and a naturopathy student. And I'll just put the links below. But my YouTube is wisehealer quantum healing, and my website is wisehealer.love.
Awesome, thanks, Shannon. So I'm a quantum hypnosis person as well, and I'm a naturopath. And I've got a real interest in fairies, which I thought it sort of motivated me to suggest the chat. And also I was just feeling that everyone's always focusing at the moment on negative stuff with hypnotherapy, or not negative, but, just about entity release and trauma, and we've got to release trauma. And I think people are really feeling the energies at the moment. Everyone seems to be, or people that I speak to and see online, that a lot of people are feeling really flat and unmotivated. So we thought we'd get together and just talk about some uplifting things to do with fun and magic and fairies and elementals. And I noticed the other day that Cora, when we were having a chat, had said to me that what drew you to hypnosis was magic and the connection to magic. And I think we need to remember that, how important it is to be uplifted and filled with joy, actually, as well, because we need more balance in our lives. So I thought I would just start with a little bit about fairies. For me, I've always had a connection to fairies since I was a little girl, actually, because I grew up with my two brothers on a property in rural New Zealand, and we had our own beach. We had an orchard, and it was at a peninsula with a road down the middle, and we'd always hang out around actually pine trees and macrocarpa trees, even though we had a fruit orchard. And I spent a lot of time outside playing under the trees, like in the moss, playing with fairies. I think I loved skipping and climbing trees like most little girls. But my first hypnotherapy session was with Laura Whitworth, who on our actually live training. And this wasn't the most positive aspect about fairies, but I remember her taking me back to when I had some entity attachments, and I was skipping along, and it wasn't the happiest. There were things going on in the environment, actually, and that's how I got some attachments. But one of them was actually had pinned down my shoulder. I've had chronic shoulder pain, and it was a mischievous fairy. And I was going to go back and listen to the session, but to find out more, because I can't remember all the details, but I haven't managed to find it yet. So that was really interesting, because I remember Laura saying, "Oh, mischievous fairies." So I haven't heard too much about mischievous fairies. I don't know if either of you have. No. So I've had a couple of...
Sorry.
You go.
I was going to say I had two fairy past life regressions myself, one positive and one negative. So let you carry on with your story.
Okay, and then you talk about yours. So then when we moved here, we live, off-grid, and we've got lots of pine trees. And in the last few years, since we've been here for 5 or 6 years, there's been a lot more moss growing, and because we've had so much rain in New Zealand, and mushrooms and toadstools under by our creek. And I started thinking, oh, that's where the fairies are. And I had an experience, and actually it was the one that I shared with Cora, where I had a session with you, and we're asking about a couple of things, where I felt like I saw out of the corner of my eyes this little fluttering thing flying. And so I asked about that, and it was really interesting because what came through from my higher self was that I was really connected to the fairy realm here. And a lot of people say I've got a bit of fairy energy, actually. Maybe I'm a bit scattered. But yeah, it was really interesting what came through. And so since then, we've now got lots of fairy things around here. And my partner made these beautiful little fairy houses, which they're very cute for our granddaughters, but they're made out of bark and they're probably about this big, and they've got roofs and doors that open. He's made little benches and seats for the fairies as well. And we were going to put them under the trees down by our creek where the fairy dell is, but we haven't got them out of the house yet because it's too wet. So but I have had a couple of sessions with people about fairies. But you tell us about your experiences first, Cora, please.
Well, what the positive one, because I'd had quite a few different past life regressions at this point, because when we first trained together ages ago, we used to swap sessions, didn't we? So I got kind of into the habit of kind of thinking every session would be like something traumatic that was going to be coming up to be cleared, sort of some sort of, like you were saying, some sort of trauma, etc. And this session, I was just like a fairy, and I just had this beautiful community of fairies, and we were all just like gathered around a table, and we were sorting through all the flowers, and we all had these beautiful little houses and the trees, and we went for a walk down to a river, and the whole way through the session I was waiting for something dark and horrible to happen. I was really, really on edge. It was really silly. And when we got to the higher self part at the end, they were just like, well, it was just about joy. That was it. That was the point of showing you. We just wanted to remind you about the joy and there was nothing else to learn in that lifetime. I just chose to have that experience just to remember the joy and the beauty and the loveliness. We walked to a little waterfall down by a river, and all around the edge there were crystals, beautiful tiny little crystals, and it was all so pretty, and just friendship and everybody just being so happy, and all the lights at night when the sun went down, all the lights in the trees. It was just so beautiful. So that was the positive. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I'll just share my other one then. My actual session with a client who it was similar to that on that theme. She went through the door and she came out and she was sprinkling fairy dust and she felt like Tinkerbell or something. And she said, well, we're sprinkling it over the people down there on this realm. It wasn't Earth, and they can't see her, but they just sprinkle it, and it was just so lovely and light and fun. And I said, well, who do you sprinkle it with? And she said, sprinkle it on. And she said, on people who've got a bit of heaviness and need to lighten up. It was really cute, actually. That's nice. It was actually at Crystal City, now that I remember it. It's amazing how we forget the sessions, isn't it? So I actually re-listened to it yesterday because I've got that one. It's one of the few I've got on my channel. But I've just written it down. Yeah, so the people couldn't see them. And then she went, then we moved you forward, and it was actually, there was something bad happening. So the people had to move, and then it was, the people in the city, and they relocated as well, all the fairies. There weren't lots of bird life, so she must have been up really high. I was trying to get, more information about it, but it was more about them as what they do, these fairies, for want of a better word, how they just sprinkle it on, the fairy dust on people and that. And then we went to move it forward to the end of the life, and she said that they could actually they were a higher frequency and they could just transmute themselves back to source. It wasn't a huge shift. And I thought that was really interesting to go through that experience. Yeah. But what she said was the same, that she didn't have that much joy in her life and she needed to remember that.
That's neat how there's that common theme of joy that comes through with the positive fairies that come through. That's really neat. I went to Canada one time and found all these fairy figurines and brought them back to Australia, and my kids love them. They play with them in the garden. I have so many fairy figurines, and it's just been beautiful memories. I have so many pictures of them in the garden, just with all their fairy stuff set up. And I've always had a connection with like Tinkerbell as a kid and fairies and that sort of thing. I have yet to have one come through in session yet, but I've had a lot of other beings come up and that are sort of, you know, in that fairy tale they say realm or whatever. But it's so interesting how even in Tinkerbell movies and things and stories, how much, you know, they've tried to get us to think that these are just fairy tales, that they're not real, but it's amazing how all of these types of beings come through in different sessions, and we're from different parts of the world, you know. Cora's from the UK, like over in the UK, New Zealand, Australia, and how we all just have different clients who don't even know each other, and all this is coming through. It's pretty amazing. And there's, you know, it goes back to cultures of, you know, different cultures who back in the day have said and that they've seen these beings as part of their cultures and stuff in the past. It's really neat. Yeah.
I was going to say it is quite hard for people to sort of understand and contemplate that it could possibly be real. Because have you heard of this called a SETI? It's in America. It's like a real hotspot for UFOs, and there's a guy called James Gilead, and they have people go there just to see the UFOs coming in. There's a really special mountain range, and it's basically just the spheres of light in the sky, isn't it? And there's loads of videos of them just like travelling around. But he also talks about the Sasquatch and gnomes on his property. Yeah. He sees gnomes, and I was a gnome in a session once, and I literally looked like a little garden gnome with a little red hat on. But a friend of mine, he was like, totally fine with like UFOs, seeing the lights. Yeah, he could get all of that. But he said, but when he started talking about the Sasquatch sort of appearing on the land and sort of like slipping in and out of the dimension of Earth, at that point he was just like, no, it's utter rubbish. I can't. He just couldn't relate to that. Which is quite common, I think, because it's just like, for some people, it's just a stretch too far for their imagination to contemplate that could be something that is real or has been real.
That's funny. I know someone who's very religious, and they don't agree with, you know, with hypnosis or anything that comes through with sessions and all that, but they have a massive fear of Bigfoot, you know, and they think, you know, they know Bigfoot's real. So it's funny how everyone's so different, you know. I really
you go.
No, that's it.
I saw a Sasquatch in one of my sessions once, and it was not like, I was imagining there were going to be these really furry sort of cuddly creatures, but its fur actually looked more like almost like crystals. It sort of had this sort of iridescent glow, and it kind of felt like it would be sort of crunchy to feel, beautiful. Like crystalline, that crunchiness.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which was weird. Yeah. I don't know if that's...
Tell us about that. What was the Sasquatch doing? Or can you remember?
We were at the mountain. I can't remember exactly. I can't remember exactly why they were there, but I just remember we were around a fire. We were gathering. I think it was in a cave at the top of a mountain, and there were some Sasquatch, and there were other elementals. I think I was a human, so it was. Yeah, I can't remember the whole story. It's so many sessions, and it was just quite a long time ago.
I feel that about the fairies. It's interesting because a lot of people think, you know, you've gone away with the fairies, or that you're a bit of a nutcase if you see the fairies at the bottom of your garden. So maybe it's the words that have been used have actually encouraged people to feel certain things about certain things. Like if you think about the woman who's away with the fairies as opposed to someone who's looking at the lights in the sky, maybe, or the man who's hunting Sasquatch, or the Loch Ness monster.
Yeah, true. I never thought of that, but yeah, it could be.
But I've always... Oh, sorry, you go.
I was just going to say, do you remember the story of a little girl, I think they may have been in England, that they sort of saw fairies at the bottom of the garden? I think they took photographs. It was like photographic evidence. And then they sort of eventually sort of decided it must have been photoshopped, and it was a bit of a controversy, wasn't it? Do you remember that?
I do. Oh, yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I always thought that must have been true, really, personally.
Me too.
Exactly. I have, I have a friend who's a psychologist, and apparently that she gets a lot of clients who have children, and they do see a lot of these different beings. And I asked her, well, how do you work with clients and children who see these things, these beings? And, because psychology can be really science-based, with their training and their university that they have to go through. And she said, well, what I do is I just treat them like they actually can see these beings. I don't treat them like they're crazy or anything. I just I have to think as a therapist, well, just because I can't see them doesn't mean they can't see them. And what if they can see it? So for her, it comes up with children, and, I feel there has to be definitely something there. And like, how do they get these ideas for these movies and stories? They have to get the ideas from somewhere. And the fact that it does come up, like I said, in so many hypnosis sessions from different people around the world, then there's got to be something there, And then, if you look into the history of different cultures, exactly, it comes up in their beliefs. And the Vikings, I know, believe that. And I have a Viking book about how the Vikings used to live. It was a Steiner book that I ordered from the Steiner library, and for children, and it has like all the characters of Inner Earth and what the Vikings believed and all that as well. And maybe over the years it just as religion and Christian church maybe become so dominant, maybe and people putting down people who were from different cultures. I mean, even with what they would say pagan or whatever, which is a pretty derogatory word, really, because even farmers, like, even if you lived on a farm, you got classed as pagan. And then the whole witch thing, maybe it's just been kind of drowned out a little bit through society as these more dominant cultures like came in or something. You know what I mean? It feels like it's been kind of phased out, and then they've changed it to make people think it's make believe. But yeah,
I was doing a bit of research recently because I had a bit of channeling come through, because sometimes I do like earth energy. I get called to go to various places, and what came through recently was Lindisfarne. And Lindisfarne is like it's called the Holy Island. It's up in the north of England, and it was one of the very first abbeys. Like I was doing a bit of reading about it. One of the very first Christian abbeys, very first monastic buildings, and it was raided by the Vikings, and the people that lived there were sort of slaughtered at that time. That was the story that's quite common. I think it's in some of these Viking sort of reenactment program type things. But the actual story of the person that was there, he was like a Celtic priest type thing, and like he was a visionary, so he could sort of tell the future. So he had like visions of the future, and he was like really popular and he was also a healer. He did like miraculous healing. So the stories of all this healing that he did. And he was like more apparently from the Celtic tradition. And at that time there was a bit of a battle going on, not battle, but there was sort of conflict between the original Celtic priests and then the more like the Roman type of religious priests, and they both celebrated Easter at different times, and it was kind of like they kind of ended up being subservient to the Roman ideology of Christianity. I think at that point, really early on, before any of the big churches were built, those original Christian sort of Celtic traditions were much more. Like there were things like healing and being able to see into the future and sort of all of these type of things like did exist, and it was all squashed a bit, I think, to be it's not in the Bible really anymore, is it? If you talk about sort of psychic abilities or sort of, I mean, miraculous healing's obviously still in the Bible, but like you said, like people that believe in God and go to church, generally speaking, are a little bit fearful of hypnosis, which you think about the very, very early Christian stories, they've Well, loads of these like saints and things, they all had visions, didn't they? So they were connecting to their higher self, and they were sort of obviously clairaudient and clairvoyant, because they could see angels and they could get messages from up high. So
yeah, I think it's
strange. Christians are scared of that. It's like it can't exist in this day and age, but back then it was fine.
Yeah, well, we've been really shut down as like a narrow band of frequency, haven't we? I feel like it's like we tuning ourselves to a radio station. We've got a narrow, and also they talk about, the colours like infrared. I think we can only see a small range, like cats. My cat was sitting on me the other day, and she keeps looking up behind me on the couch, and I'm like, I really want to take a photo to show. Now, what is she looking at? And I know cats can see other things, other realms. So I feel like we've just lost. Well, society has sort of shut that down for whatever reason, so that we don't access those realms as easily. But I was thinking it'd be good to hear from you, Shannon, about was it the centaurs that you said you had a lot to do with?
Yeah, so with the centaur, I did have a client who had a session as a centaur, and it's interesting because I was told that centaurs were negative and dark and things, but it wasn't at all in this session. What had happened was the session started out, there was no color, and the client was a centaur in this really sort of barren land. And it has to do with color as well. So that's wow. There you go. And so I know Laura and training and things that said, well, if you have a client who go into in their past life part of the session and they're not seeing any color and it's gray and barren, then they're probably not in a past life part. That it's probably they're in this and like still dealing with entity attachments and things like that. So my client was like, no, it's all gray and barren. And so I was like, and she said she was a centaur. And I thought, oh, that's what I wasn't sure if she was in a past life or just stuck in the somewhere in a different, whatever entity realm or something. But it turned out that there was no color because there was just this really bad energy that had come over the land. And there was, so the centaur's responsibility was basically to he went around and just made sure that the energy in all the lands was good. And that was his.
Oh, wow.
So the centaur went into this cave and he said there was this dragon that was blocking this entranceway to the cave, and he had to get rid of the dragon to bring color back to the land. The dragon was blocking something that was causing the land to be like that. There was no life, like no flowers could grow, plant life or anything, just really barren. But the centaur was sad a little bit, like about he thought that he was going to have to kill the dragon, and he didn't want to kill the dragon. And so I was like actually kind of sad that he had to do that to bring this energy back to the land. And so I said, well, how did you go about that? He was like, oh, I think I need to kill the dragon. And then when we got to the dragon, basically, he didn't need to kill the dragon, but he did something energetically and the dragon knew, like the dragon didn't, I don't think, wanted to be doing his job either of blocking this crystal or this energy, whatever it was that was causing this. And so the dragon basically knew that its time was up, and then the dragon moved on, and then color and everything came back to the land. And it just continued on like that. And then the centaur went to another cave, and it was similar with a different one, but restoring the beautiful energy. And
I think dragons can be infringed because my second fairy lifetime, I was actually, a dragon swooped down, the sky was purple and a black dragon swooped down and grabbed me in its talons and my body just went limp and then it just dropped me from a great height and I was dead. So I
really?
think can be dragons that have sort of maybe sort of their energy's been sort of like people can get loads of entity attachments and become quite, can be very negative or just maybe just a negative dragon. But it feels like when we get sort of really negative people, you can have a lot of entity attachments as well, which like can amplify that content. So we weren't supposed to be talking about
oh, well, that's not the focus anyway. Wow, that was fascinating.
Well, so Ian, do you guys know Ian from Reiki? Ian from Reiki. Excuse me, sorry. Well, he had a session with me where he was a healer and he had a good dragon. Like he was kind of his sidekick, you know, who helped with his healing of the town that he was in as well. So he was really close and had a really close connection with his dragon, was basically his best mate. So yeah, it's interesting how even with the fairy, how you had a not so bright fairy and then you have beautiful fairies come in. It's interesting.
I had a lovely session with someone who's a healer. She's a naturopath as well, actually, and she was training her dragon, and she'd not really been delving into the level that we've been looking at, but she was like a Gandalf, a wizard. And she started off and she was training the dragon. He was flying and he was having so much fun. And then she went to a place where she was looking after the castle and all the people with her dragon. And then we went forward to the end of the life and the dragon was dying. And she actually, for her, she felt that the answer, well, how would you explain it? For her realization about that was that she felt that her magic, she couldn't use her magic in this life. So it was a real connection for her about the magic, and in the session was about magic and that, the sense that she wasn't connected to it, and there was a sadness. But it really inspired her, and she ended up getting a beautiful tattoo of a dragon on her arm.
Oh, neat.
Because she realized she could reconnect with it. Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah. And I had another dragon one with a lady who said to me in the session, before the session, that she felt really connected to dragons. And she went to this place where she was in a castle working with dragons, going through portals, and she actually even had her family there with her. She had 4 children, and the children and her husband were there in that life. It was really amazing. I love those sessions because, just to see the power of how people can be so connected with what their purpose is now in this life.
Absolutely. And, dragons is another one where, society has made people think that they're make-believe and things like that. But I had come through with a client session that they are still here. They live in the mountains, and that they're still here, and that they hide from humans because humans think that they're not real, and that it's too dangerous for them to be around humans who they don't want to scare humans and things like that. And also look at the Chinese culture, how significant the dragon is in their culture. I don't know if you guys have ever been over to China or whatever, but when I was in Shanghai, there was there's old buildings, like tons of dragons. It's such a huge part of their culture as well. And again, there's such an ancient culture in these buildings there that are just so ancient and old that they have there with these dragons. And like, where do they come from? Like I kind of think, well, they must be real, because how do you get dragons and that in such ancient architecture and all these things if they weren't real, right? At some point. So that's just my opinion.
They come up in sessions a lot as well, don't they, dragons? I've written on dragons and I've been dragons, and they seem to come up an awful lot. And also when I meditate and I do like earth energy healing, like that's the thing that started confusing me, because I didn't know because I often see dragons within the earth, and I know that they call the ley lines dragon lines, don't they? They've got the emperor dragon lines, and they're And I couldn't figure out if it was just my sort of higher self or my sort of trying to sort of give me visualization, like showing me dragons just so I could understand that it was an energy line, or whether it was like these dragons were actually part of the earth, and within the earth actually sort of guardians of the mountains and things, because I know other people that have sort of connected with the energy of dragons on particular mountains and things like that as well.
Amazing. I just love it all. So good.
Me too.
Yeah, it's hard to know whether they're physically real or they're just energetic, or they're sort of part of the structure of the sort of original energies of the earth, or it's very difficult because we see it visually, but is that just are they energetic, or are they actually physically real like we are, or were they physically real like we are, or were they more like fifth dimensional, so you, like light body type things, if you see.
But then if we're moving into 5D, then more people will see them. So because we're having a wider frequency band of resonance, so maybe they're going to come back. Maybe more people will see them. And I think that about unicorns too. I've not had any unicorns come in sessions, only in meditations, but I watched a video about one of the old maps. You know how there's those maps like from the 1500s or 1700s and at different realms, and they've got unicorns and other things in it. And I think, well, it's just fascinating.
It is, yeah. The old like Viking books like have inner Earth on their maps as well, which is really interesting. And then they show like where inner Earth is, and then some of the different beings that are part of inner Earth and that. So I thought that was really interesting with these. I
went to inner Earth in one of my sessions. My son was this like insectoid being on a spaceship, and the spaceship kind of went through a portal into inner Earth, and I sort of followed them in. It was very bizarre. There were these funny little purple sort of creature things that were and they were sort of welcomed by, there was this man that was really tall. He looked like an elven man with really long hair, and he was very grand. And then there was also a lady, and it was like they had separate castles on these mountains within inner Earth, and down at the bottom was like a valley with all the rainforests, and they were helping these sort of insectoidy type beings to settle into these little sort of homes, these little sort of jungle houses at the bottom of the valley. It was very strange, but there's lots of elementals within inner Earth.
I had an inner Earth session with my first session with Laura back when I first started training, like right before I started training. I had a session with her, and I was like a Gandalf type of is that the one from Lord of the Rings? Or is that Harry Potter? What's the main wizard?
I think of them as the same.
Yeah,
they're almost the same.
Well, I was basically like a wise man like that. I had a staff with a big crystal on the end, but it showed me first what I looked like when I was a bit younger. Like I had a brown beard and that as a younger fella, and then it showed me older. And so I went to visit the Hobbits, and a Hobbit had a message for me at the time. So this was 2021, I think, July 2021. And he was so I had to crouch down to get in his little Hobbit house. And so I was inside because I was very tall, and I was inside the Hobbit house, and the Hobbit said to me, he was pacing kind of back and forth, and he was like doing this, and his message was that he said, you need to go back to the humans and tell them that, you know, that they're not in this alone. Like what's going on in the world right now, that this battle, they're not in it alone. We're in this with them, and they need to know that, you know, there's the birds, the bees, the trees, all the beings like us here. We're all with it. We're all fighting this battle alongside the humans.
Awesome. Like
humans think that they're by themselves in this battle here, but we're not. We're all in it, like together, you know, trying to restore Earth and fight the darkness, I suppose, that way, and to restore the balance of the ecosystem here or whatever. And it was so beautiful because I was like, yeah, you know, it was a good reminder to go that, yeah, we are like the kookaburras, the kangaroos, like the trees, everything. Like we're all the flowers. We're all want the ecosystem and the energy to be restored to Earth, not just humans. So that was really lovely. When I was that Gandalf-y type wise man, when Laura actually said, I'm backtracking now, when she said, okay, let's go to the end, the last day of his life, there was no end. I just floated back up to the rest of the council. I just like floated up. And I just said, there was no death with that session. It was the only probably session I've had where there was no death or dramatic thing. It was just that I must have just floated down to visit the Hobbits and floated back the same way, like in the movie, how some of those characters did that as well. But I visited this council came through and had a lot of the similar. Obviously, they look different, because you know that's a movie or whatever. But I mean, obviously, they're facial things. But again, it's like, well, I mean, this must be where they get these ideas for these movies. Like, if people are seeing this,
I think they channel it, don't they? I think they must.
I do too.
Absolutely.
They must have, like with Dolores Cannon, she used to say that sort of they'd kind of put these ideas out into the ether, wouldn't they? And then, so you'd get someone inventing, sort of maybe one or two people who get the same invention idea come to them at the same time. So I think maybe these beings just kind of think, right, we're going to give you all of these ideas and you're going to write them all down. And they think it's just their imagination, but they're actually connecting to these sort of past memories of their own, probably their own past life memories.
It makes you think that maybe a lot of these stories may have been true as well, and that they're just purposely saying, oh, we're making this movie to make humans think that they're not true. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And let's just say that, oh, we brought up this movie and it's so people don't think any of this stuff is true or whatever. But even in the
Avatar movies, that strikes me as having a lot of truth in it.
I had a session where I was one of the blue beings in Avatar as well, and I looked different. I was more cat, and it was in Lemuria, and so I was a cat being in Lemuria, and I looked more cat than the characters in the movies, though, and they made them look more human in the movie, but they definitely looked more cat.
The big eyes.
I was tall like a human. I stood up like a human, but I had a tail and I could climb up trees and do lots of things. And basically, what happened in my session was that there was certain other beings that came in to Lemuria with technology and things like that. And so I knew that the movie of Avatar, the first one, was about Lemuria because of my session, because it was, I basically was just one of those blue cat beings. And then there was also people in the village, humans in the village living there as well. And then basically what happened was, there was part of, I'd say reptilian or Anunnaki or something that came in, and they brought their technology and things, but the energy was lower, and so basically wiped out my energy realm as a blue being, and I couldn't no longer live there because their energy of these beings that came into Lemuria was at a lower frequency than what our beings could live, and so basically it just wiped us out because we couldn't live at that lower frequency of energy that came through, and kind of this darkness came over. And because again I was seeing those bright colors in the session as one of these beings, the plants, everything, and then interestingly enough, I've had a session with a client who was Anunnaki, and who was one of the Anunnaki who came into Lemuria, and I asked him what happened, and he said that there was so much guilt that he felt, and didn't know where this guilt came from. And in his session, they didn't know. He said that they didn't know that them coming to Lemuria was going to wipe. They didn't know that was going to happen, that it was going to wipe out all these beings. And it was so interesting because I was one of those beings that got wiped out because of the energy of the Anunnaki and that came in and with their energy. And there was a lot of different types of beings apparently that came in to Lemuria. It wasn't just the blue beings or the people, the village people. And so he said, we thought we were coming in to meet the people but our energy just, wiped other
There's always two sides, aren't there?
Yeah, it was so interesting because when I talked to this Anunnaki, like, he kind of told me a little bit what happened in Lemuria and then to Atlantis to now. And he said that they're waiting, like, for, they're still waiting for some change to co-create, like from some, like, of the darkness to be removed so that they can co-create with humans. And that, you know, that's what they wanted to do, was to come to Lemuria and co-create with people. And then that happened. And he said that they've had, the Anunnaki have, like, had to live with this guilt that happened in Lemuria or whatever. And so there's so much symbolism in movies as to what comes up.
We could do a whole chat on Atlantis and Lemuria and that sort of stuff.
Oh yeah, it's totally for another chat, definitely. But yeah.
Can I just mention about my Gandalf experience?
Oh yeah.
I wasn't Gandalf, but it was when I was going down into the garden and it was actually, well, I'm saying Gandalf, but it was like the hermit from the tarot cards. He turned up and he took me into this. So I'm walking down the garden and there I see him and he takes me into this stone sort of cavern. And there's the table to sit around, just me and him. And he's a lot bigger than me. And he was giving me a gift. And it was the gift of scrying. And so he gave me a big crystal ball, I guess. It was on the table and it was really interesting. It was a gift because of, I guess, what I've been learning or growing, you know. And I could go back in there and look in there and use that as a tool to see in the other timelines, I guess. And I felt quite chuffed about that, that I was given that gift in that one. But I haven't had many inner earth type experiences with clients or myself, but my last client that I had a session, or that came to see, actually did one of those things where they go through one door and then they go to another door and then the other one, because it's their jumpers. I think that's how they've been described. So there were 3 different experiences which were all very relevant, but they were very different. And one of them, and it's a guy, the client, a big tall guy, and he went through this door and it was a tiny little door, skew with, and went through and was everything. When I was about to ask the question, but he actually said what I was going, answered it. I was going to say, what do you look like? And can you look in a mirror? And anyway, he turned out to be a female orc with big pointy ears and, big eyes, and dressed all sort of in what's it called, metal sort of stuff, and went down this dark, damp sort of tunnel down into this room. And in the room, the father of this orc girl was sitting, and there wasn't a lot happening, but it actually had a meaning for this client, what was happening, which was, I think that the other one didn't want to talk, and it was about the father, and it was just about their relationship. But, well, he transferred it back to a relationship in his life. Sorry, it's my computer's making a noise. Yeah, so that was quite interesting, because I was like, oh, this is a bit, but the client wasn't worried at all. It was just like, oh, that was interesting.
That's good.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I once went to a realm that was really connected to Earth with a client of mine. She was on Earth having just a normal Earth experience, and then she came into a woodland and she came across a stream, and there was a man sitting near the stream, and this, sorry, not a stream, just a pool, and this pool started to swirl, and then it almost sort of transported her. It became a portal and sucked her through into this other realm where the sky was purple, and there were 3 moons in the sky, and was it 2? I can't remember. It might have been 2 actually, 2 moons. And she sort of found this white castle in the middle of a lake, and the trees had faces and they could talk, and it was like she was taken back to this castle where her parents lived, and she'd figured out that she'd chosen she was the daughter of the king and the queen in this castle, and they had this kind of crystal balls that reminded me, because she said the crystal balls, but they kind of looked into, and within this ball she could see the humans on Earth, and she could see the experiences that they were having, that they were not having enough, and she really wanted to help. So she'd made the choice to have like a normal human life. And when she was on Earth, she had a cat, and it was just a normal tabby cat. And when she came back to this realm, the cat had gone with her, and it changed into this huge, big, like almost tiger, like a huge white and grey striped tiger. And then she sort of went back to the sea house because she felt really sad because they disapproved of her choice. So that was like the reason she'd gone back to see them, because they'd been tracking her and trying to get her back to her realm. And so she always felt threatened, but she sort of went back and she had this talk with them, and she must have been there for years because she'd left her daughter, I think she'd left her daughter behind. But when to get back to the Earth, once she'd had this experience and she'd settled things with the parents, she went down a tunnel and it was lit by flames. And as she came out the other side, she sort of stepped through a door in a tree and then came back into Earth that way. Yeah, which was really strange, wasn't it?
Wow, yeah.
Quite remarkable.
So fascinating.
Yeah, and then she was
just going on these journeys with people. It's just so amazing. I love it. Could make movies or draw pictures, or I mean, they could. And just to remind that we don't share information of people who haven't said that they're willing to share the information. Just as a bit of a disclaimer there. Yeah. So has anyone, it's been about an hour, so it must be time to wind up. Has there anything, final thoughts that you would like to tell people about this whole realm or anything at all? Shannon?
I think I'm pretty good. I think I feel like the more people have you have an open mind, and just hypnosis has been just an amazing journey of discovering all these wonderful different areas of our world and of our universe. It's been really, really a lovely journey. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, there's always a reason for it as well, isn't there? There's always like a message which can help you in your current life. So regardless of like what the experiences that you have within hypnosis, the message is always so helpful, and it always helps you on your path, I think, which is what I love about it.
That's true, yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree. There's sort of themes that come in for people, and maybe sometimes people might get disappointed that they wanted to have sort of a galactic or otherworldly experience, but maybe they need to clear the past life, parallel, whatever life that and the energies around that first before they get to that. But it's fun anyway. There's so much. People always feel so relaxed and have come to realizations after sessions, which I think is so good. Yeah. Okay, well, thank you, everyone, and we'll make sure we put everyone's links below, and I hope you enjoy this chat or have enjoyed it, and we'll see you around.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for hosting.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you.